Good day, everyone. I am Jimwal Ativa, an EDD student. Now that we know the varied types of learners as well as the role of instructional designers, let us explore the purpose of needs assessment in determining environmental and contextual needs by Jill E. Stefania. With that, let us be guided with these objectives first. At the end of the session, the participants are expected to define instructional design, needs assessment, and needs analysis. The second one is you're going to explore the intersection between needs assessment, needs analysis, and instructional design. And lastly, you're going to appreciate the role of context in needs assessment. Now, let us define instructional design, and we're going to dissect its definition. What is instructional design? According to Ricci, Klein, and Tracy of 2011, instructional design is the science and art of creating detailed specifications for the development, evaluation, and maintenance of situations which facilitate learning and performance. As what you have seen on the screen, there are some phrases or a word that highlight them. First, creating detailed specifications. The second is evaluation. And the last one is facilitate learning and performance. It's now time to dissect this definition. The first one is creating detailed specifications. The information that a needs assessment yields provides the details and specification needed for the instructional designer. And why we need to have this specification? The main purpose is that it creates an instructional product that is customized and accounts for what we call as unique needs of the learning audience. Simple understanding, it's because of these specifications we identify what type of audience we have and what type of instructional support or instructional material or intervention can be given to them. After having this creation of detailed specification, we have this conducting evaluation. Now is the perfect time to go back with the core and compare the progress between the current level of performance, which is the present, the situation, versus after administration of instructional intervention. You might be asking question right after, what went well? Or what are the things to improve, modify, or realign. After doing this, the definition also tells us about maintaining of situations that facilitate learning and performance. It means to say that instructional designers and the team members will also be better positioned to monitor the instructional delivery and transfer of learning and knowledge to the job or desired application if they have been presented with sufficient data concerning these phases. The sufficient data are very much important and relevant, especially in determining if these instructional materials are suited to the identified audience, as well as if these instructional materials or interventions already delivered or have delivered a good and transfer of learning and knowledge. Now, now that we already defined the instructional design, it is important to differentiate between needs assessment and needs analysis as they are not synonymous with one another, but they are often used interchangeably. The question is, what is needs assessment? Needs assessment is actually the process of gathering information to determine whether there is a gap. The keyword there is gap between your current state and your desired state. I'd like to illiterate the word gap. This gap yields the need. Gap is equal to the need. The need, where we identify what problem is that, and the need as our guide to come up with an instructional materials that will answer to this specified and identified need. This slide shows an illustration of a current state in a sad phase, and note that the gap portion, you are to identify the key steps. That's actually the process. And the action plan to take, some sort of recommendation and what you're gonna do. Thus, a part of it, we need to have the presence of our assessment process. But before that, I'd like to show this to you for more emphasis with need. The need refers to the gap, again, or discrepancy between the present state. Other reference call it what is. And desired state or desired outcome, other reference also call this as what should be. Remember that the need is neither the present nor the future state. The need is the gap between them. As you can see in the illustration, the current result says that 30% of third grade migrant students meet the state proficiency level in reading. Only 30%. What we are desiring for on this situation is that we need to have 100%. In a measurable output, there is a need of 70% of them must reach the proficiency level. Now that we identified already the need with the help of our need assessment, it is now the works of needs analysis. What is needs analysis? According to Kaufman and Guerra Lopez, needs analysis is actually the process of further investigating the situation to understand why this gap actually exists in the first place. The data that is gathered during the needs assessment is analyzed to determine what is contributing to the causing of the gap. With a given example, we wanted to go deeper on the causes. Why 70% of the third grade migrant children has low proficiency level in reading? Probably one of your causes, the language barrier, or this could be one of the causes. To emphasize the relationship between the two, the needs assessment determines the gap or the need, while the needs analysis understand why this gap exists. Thus, needs assessment and needs analysis are very helpful to provide an opportunity for us instructional designers to develop instructional materials. These two components are very essential as our guide in crafting our instructional materials. In more cases, in more cases than that, when instructional designers are brought onto a project, some solutions have already been decided. For instance, we need to design an online degree program. We need to design a safety course for incoming employees. We need to design a team training course for the hospital staff. If you look closely, you will see that each of the statements contain the word need, whether it is for your client or for a supervisor. The need has already been decided. So no need in the presence of the needs assessment because it's already been deciding. So what do you think, sir? It's as a good thing, or what do you think? It could be a bad thing, or there's some consequences. Some of it, the caution or the warning of that is that there are a lot of times where the need has been decided with no needs assessment ever having been conducted. That's according to Peterson. Oftentimes, when this occurs, go back to the slides because the slide is too fast. According to them, when this situation actually occurs, the instructional designer begins work on their task only to find what they have a lot of unanswered questions. Few of these unanswered questions are, how will we know if they are implementing what they have learned in their actual jobs, right? Or how will they use the instructional after training takes place? Or is there a subject matter expert that we can speak with to provide some more guidance on what the learners need? All of these questions are very specific and unique to the learning audience of a project. Some of these questions may be related to instructional environment, while others may be looking ahead to how learners will be expected to transfer this learning to a real world setting. And that is the perfect time where the needs analysis process comes in. So, what are the processes of needs assessment? There are 5 steps to follow as suggested with this reference. And please bear in mind that in the needs assessment process, the assessment tool, I'll go back here, the assessment tool is already been part of what we call as process. Let's explore the steps. The first step is identification of problem. First thing first, we need to identify the problem. This step is typically completed in consult with the client, our audience, the individuals, who are actually the one who will receive our instructional design services. During this phase, the purpose of the needs assessment is identified for the instructional designer to begin gathering data. What data should be gathered out from the problem or out from the need identified in order to address the gap of the performance. Knowing already the problem, the second step is you're going to identify the data sources. What data sources should be used? Once the problem to be explored has been identified, instructional designers, I'll go back again, instructional designers must identify data sources that will help them better understand the situation. The data sources will help better understand the need, the gap, and the situation. Instructional designers must gather data that will help them explore the situation from multiple angles. So, where are we going to have it? Examples of these data sources include, but are not limited to, task analysis, direct observations, focus groups, interventions, documents analysis, reviews of existing work products, and surveys with the help of our assessment tools. The third step is data collection. Of course, you're done already identifying the data source, so now it's time to collect all the data. This phase involves the instructional designer gathering data based on the data sources that were identified in the previous step. After you have already collected the data, the fourth step is data analysis. Once collection is complete, the instructional designer begins to analyze all data to identify patterns and factors contributing to the problem identified at the beginning of the assessment. Depending on the findings from the data collection and analysis phases, the problem may be modified to be more consistent with the actual situation as depicted by the data. So it can still be manipulated. And lastly, of course, we have these recommendations. Upon identifying patterns contributing to the problem, the instructional designer makes a list of recommendations. Why we need to do that? To present this to their client. These recommendations are typically prioritized according to severity of the need and level of urgency. Because there is a lot of needs identified, but we go directly to what we call as the very and the most need part according to its level of urgency. Okay, so now how does the NA or needs assessment tool conceptualize and help the process? The materials adopted from planning and conducting needs assessment a practical guide in 1995, a comprehensive needs assessment introduces the three-phase model of needs. It is a systematic approach that progresses through a defined series of phases. Phase 1 involves an exploratory what is. If you could still remember, it actually like our situation, current situation, or identifying the problem and planning. Phase 2 involves the gathering and analysis of data. And lastly, phase 3 showcases the decision making or the recommendations. As you can see, this reference summarizes the assessment processes into three phases incorporated with needs assessment tools. Let's explore this one by one. I'd like to go to the next slide. Phase 1. So let's begin exploring these phases, three phases. The purpose of phase 1 is to investigate what is already known or known about the needs of the target group, to determine the focus and scope of the needs assessment, and to gain commitment for all the stages of the assessment, including the use of the findings for program planning and implementation. Phase 1. Explore what it is. And step 1, successful projects have leadership. It means to say that there is a key person in planning and managing a needs assessment with a project manager. But of course, the project manager needs members. So there is a form of needs assessment committee. The members of a needs assessment committee should represent those organizations and individuals that are critical to ensuring the commitment and follow up. There is the word commitment. And they're going to determine a reporting schedule, timely reports to top management and other important stakeholders, with opportunities for interaction on major issues also are critical. So in this step, there is what we call a manpower in order to prepare a management plan. On the second step, you're dealing with identifying the major concerns. Of course, within the group, within the member, with the leader, reach consensus on the goals. What do you think will be the desired outcomes out from the problem that we have identified? Refine the list of goals to the top three or five until we could reach the optimum need. Brainstorm a list of concerns factors for each of the goals. Then decide on the major concern for each goal. On the third step, we're going to determine the need indicator. The need indicator identify that could verify the concern or issue exists. It actually directly says on the needs analysis where the indicator is the data that can verify that the concern why it actually exists. And the step 4, you're going to consider the data sources. Determine what kind of information would be helpful to more clearly define the need and where to get the data. And last step on the phase 1 is you're going to decide on preliminary priorities. In this manner, you're going to set the priorities of each concern as a focus in the gathering data. I will show you some example here. It is what we call as project mapping, and a project mapping can be used to provide a visual map of all the concerns and indicators related to a goal. So you might have the goal, and then you're going to file the concern as well what are the indicators of each concern. And we also have another format here, still part of it, the goal, the concern or the factors, the indicators and sources of data. Again, this mapping or project mapping provides a visual map of all the concerns and indicators related to the goal. Okay, so in phase 2, the task of phase 2 is actually to document the status, the what is of the concerned issues, to compare the status with a vision of what should be, and to determine the magnitude of the needs and their causes. The major output from this phase actually is a set of needs statements in tentative order of priority based on the critically of the need and its causes. If you could still remember about the level of urgency, this is where it falls here. In phase 2, step 1, determine the target groups. Our target groups might be all the district with eligible migrant children Or in our case example is are our migrant students. We could also have another target with groups, parents, teachers, pupils, and etc. Next step, after determining the target groups, we're going to gather data to define needs. You're going to specify what should be our desired outcome based on the program's goals. Then we're going to collect the data to determine the current state of the target group in relation to the desired outcome. And we're going to formulate statements based on the discrepancies. If you can still remember the example, it was given there a while ago in a measurable statement that 70% is actually the gap that needs the children migrant in the third grade level that actually need more enhancement with their reading skills or proficiency. Okay, so after having the data gathered and defined its need, we're going to prioritize now the need. So we're going to list the concerns and each concern. What are those concerns possibly? School affiliation, English language, course. They are actually the common concerns. Then among these concerns, we are going to separate the indicators or the factors. What are probably the factors identified in school affiliation? They might be the counselor student contact, it might be peer network, it might be extracurricular activities, and this is also true to the other concern with the English language as also with course completion. So we are actually conceptualizing it's the need, what are the causes, then after the causes, what should be the consequences. And I'm gonna present that one later on. The step four is actually identify and analyze the causes. After identifying the causes, we're going to analyze, and it actually answers why does this need persist? Why we need to have why this actually what are the reasons why this need actually exists in the first place. And lastly, we're going to summarize the findings. In the summary of the findings, we're going to collect all the documents, explain its major causes, and after that one, share it to the rest of the members. Share the results with the needs assessment committee, the managers, and other key stakeholders. Remember that these are the most important part wherein the results is being analyzed by the group. Okay, now there's an example here in phase two. We call this one as cause and consequence analysis. In this cause and consequence analysis, it determines priority of each need, examine both the difficulty to correct the need, review the ratings in light of magnitude or yung tinatawag natin level of urgency, use results to provide data for consideration in setting priorities and moving to solution strategies. How to do that? So we have here the five columns. The first column is about the need, the causes. The second column, third column, consequences. Fourth column, difficulty to correct. And last column is criticality. In the first column, you're going to list the needs that were previously identified in the needs assessment. So needs assessment actually helps to identify the needs. After identifying the needs, each of the need you're going to dissect what are the causes. And each of these causes you're going to dissect again. Do you think will be the consequences? And out from these consequences, we're going to rate low, medium, or high. And after this one, we're going to rate a scale of 1 to 5 on the degree of criticality of the need. If it is not met, with 5 being the most critical. So we could say the most critical, that's probably directly our need. The need that we're going to address. So that's all about phase two. And now let's proceed with phase three on the decision making. After identifying, the data is interpreted, the data is collected, analyzed. Now it's the decision making. It cannot be emphasized too strongly that a needs assessment is not complete unless plans are made to use the information in a practical way. The phase three is the bridge from the analysis to the action. Again, from the analysis to the action, we already analyzed the data. So it's now the perfect time to take the action. To use needs assessment findings, it answers the important question, what needs are the most critical? Remember that we're going the criticality. Ano yung pinaka-importante? What are some possible solutions? which solutions are best. The phase three, making decision, take its first step. Set the priority of needs. Okay, in a prioritizing the needs, we need to know the magnitude of discrepancies between the current and target states, maybe the causes, the degree of difficulty, the risk assessment, the effect of this to other parts of the system, and lastly, the cost implementing solutions. On the second step, it identify the possible solution. We already have the needs. So let's identify now the possible solutions. For judging the merits of alternative solution, could have it find it the strategies. So from the what is, from the current situation, identify its causes, identify the possible solution, from our what should be to our decide, then we're going to pick the most possible solutions to the causes being mentioned in our identification of the problem. Okay, so after that one, we have the step three. The step three focuses on select the solution. Naibigay na natin lahat yung solution na yon. So, the solution, evaluate and rate each solution separately against the evaluation criteria. Consider whether each of the high-ranking solutions will drive toward the contemplated change or whether they will push in the opposite direction, preventing change, or on the basis of all the information, we're going to select one solution for each need area. Probably one of the solutions might have the crafting of the instructional materials. After that one, step four, we're going to propose action plan. In the action planning, it includes description of the solutions, rationale, proposed timelines, and resource requirements. This actually reminds of our first activity in this course, wherein we are actually crafted possible and proposed instructional materials that answers to the needs of our learners in the field. And lastly, prepare report. Report at the end of this phase, a written report should be prepared to communicate the methods and results of the needs assessment to decision maker, policymakers, and key stakeholders. The report should include description of the needs assessment, major outcomes, priority needs, action plan, and lastly, the recommendations for future needs. So parang ano na siya, publication on the process that were done. And all of these phases, it lead to the creation of instructional material. So after identifying the problem, solution, the analysis, and then possible solutions, and its priority, so probably this one leads to creation of the instructional material. Now, now that we actually know the what instructional design is, what needs analysis is, as well as the needs assessment process in identifying the problem and bridging the gap from current situation to desired outcome, we would like to know what is the relationship of needs assessment, needs analysis, and instructional design. In this figure, as you can see on the screen, it provides an overview of how needs assessment and needs analysis can help leverage instructional design. So these two, needs assessment and needs analysis, help to level up or help to support the instructional design. And because of this needs assessment, because of this needs analysis, the instructional design in line to their identified needs. It supports the transfer of learning. Conducting a needs assessment provides the instructional designer with the opportunity to contextualize their project. It provides them with the opportunity to gain insight into things they should include in their designs, as well as things they should consider to avoid. Regardless of the situation, a needs assessment will help the instructional designer identify or verify the project needs. Needs analysis, on the other hand, also aids the instructional designer by providing some context as to why these needs exist in the first place. If learners are facing recurring challenges completing a particular task, instructional designers should understand the causes so that they can account for these issues in their designs. By developing a better understanding of factors that contribute to inhibit the transfer of learning, instructional designers will be able to develop a more realistic approach in order to transfer the learning. So, as you can see here, needs assessment, needs analysis, and even instructional design helps a realistic or creates realistic approach in order to transfer of learning. As needs assessment, contextualize a project, that helps instructional design to design what actually the material needed as the need is being identified. Needs analysis that tells why this gap actually exists, and it also helps the instructional design to craft the instructional material that suit to what is needed with the situation. According to some researchers, needs assessment is recognized as being an important component of instructional design process. However, it often tends to be minimized to focus more on learning analysis. So this learning analysis focus on what we call as contextual analysis. So what is contextual analysis? It is the process of analyzing factors that may contribute to or inhibit knowledge acquisitions and transfer of learning. This happens already on the process of the transfer of learning. And we have some common factors that affects a seminal piece written by Tesmer and Ritchie of 1997 suggested that contextual analysis should account for factors influencing performance in orienting context, instructional context, and transfer context. Among the factors belong to orienting context are learners' attitude, prerequisite skills, goal setting, social support, learning culture. In instructional context, instructional platform, instructional delivery, the learning role, the instructor role, and the learning culture. On the transfer of context, the factors that may affect is the support mechanism, perception of utility, incentives, and organizational structure. Hence, this figure actually provides an overview of the more common factors that influence each of these contexts. Tips for how to address these three contexts will be discussed further on the next topic or in the next reporter. By addressing these factors in instructional design practices, designers put themselves in a better position to design experiences that are relevant to the learning audience. For instance, if the design suits to their culture as part of contextualization, more of these are very effective and more of this topic will be delivered to the next discussant. To sum it, to sum it up, the needs assessment, needs analysis, and instructional design identify and develop the necessary scaffolds to manage the learning experience. I guess that would be all on my part regarding the situation, and thank you very much for listening.